So I have the benefit of interviewing Mozella Ademiluyi. Say your name again for us.
Ademiluyi, you said it perfectly.
I said it perfectly.
Yes.
And Mozella is the author of Rise, Lean Within Your Inner Power and Wisdom. And all right, Mozella, first of all, thank you so much for coming in last minute with the beam of sunlight that looks like you have been chosen. Thanks for showing up and just being you.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here, minus the beam.
I love the beam.
Yeah.
So, Mozella, that you have so much to teach people, and I'm going to go through what I think are the things that are the big takeaway from you, from your work, and from your book. So
Sure.
when you and I started working together, you had already written books. You were a poet. You were somebody who'd gathered all of these little nuggets of wisdom, and you put books out there before. But this book was different. This book was a book that you were writing for your business. This book had a completely different structure. Can you tell me about what you wanted this book to do for you when you started writing this?
Sure. Well, great question, and thanks for it, because there was purpose behind it. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro twice. My first book was a combination of poetry and prose, and it was based upon having climbed it when I was 50 and not having made it to the peak, and the whole story about what it felt like to give up because I was just, all the things that kind of went wrong. And in the back of your mind, when you could accomplish something and you don't, and then you really have time to think about it. Well, I took 10 years to think about going back, and it was very symbolic for me, because not only was I climbing to prove to myself, or just because I knew I could do it. So I thought, well, let me go back. I'm 60 now and I'm celebrating again. Let me go back on this mountain goal. And then having done so, and during the process of doing so, I really realized what a great analogy or metaphor that it was. I did this for myself and other women, giving them this real life example, adventure between doing something and it not being quite your best, and you're not quite getting to where you wanted to be. And then saying, look, I don't care how old I am. I don't care. I can do this. And you just go back and do it.
There's so many interesting things about you. One of the reasons I was so interested in this project is that you, I think, like myself, are sort of a multifaceted woman. Like you stand on stages, and I was reading that you were at the Smithsonian Institute reading one of your poems. Like when I see you, you present. I mean, you are a polished, sophisticated woman. And there's this side of you too that I own, which is this adventurer, this person who takes on hard things. And when they don't accomplish the hard things, it's the thing that gnaws on you. And so you bring to this book so many aspects of yourself. And I think your readers and your audience in general are pretty complex individuals. How would you describe your reader, the people that you wrote this book for?
I think she is a high achiever, and very often she needs to loosen up a little bit more, and not just in allowing herself to play, but allowing herself to make mistakes, allowing herself to change her mind, allowing herself to learn from the lessons, because instead of failure, as I said, it really is, what did I learn from that? And then having the courage to go back, especially if you want to, not because you necessarily, well, I've got to prove to the world. No, not you don't. But if it's something that you really want, go back and do it. And I think that's why a lot of professional women saw themselves in it, because who hasn't, failed the bar once and needs to go back and take it again? I'm one of those too. And I think we have that kind of we're tougher on ourselves, and this is kind of a failure to success, if I'll put it that way. And
I cannot relate to that at all. I have no idea what you're talking about, because I mean, it's such a common problem. But
it is.
so I love the mountain metaphor, and a lot, and when you and I were talking about it, we started talking about this journey. And of course, every editor likes the idea of a journey, because if you have a journey, you can
Right.
take people down the framework, the pathway.
Right.
But we came to the conclusion that the mountain itself is the metaphor. It's an extended metaphor. And I would love you to talk about the pluses and minuses of working with an extended metaphor, because sometimes the metaphor was so easy, and sometimes we were wrangling with that metaphor and trying to make it work.
Right.
How would you describe the whole use of a metaphor?
Well, for one thing, I think you were an excellent guide. And we do, and we had guides on the mountains. And so often, yes, it is within us. We can do it, but sometimes we just don't really know, or we haven't uncovered within ourselves exactly which direction we need to go into, even within ourselves. We don't know how to pull out those powers and what really works best for not just ourselves, but the people we're here to serve. So yeah, it was I feel that anytime I was kind of way out here, you were very helpful. And let's stay with this for a minute. Let's flesh this out a little more. Because I think what's really important when we are communicating is that we do so in a way that people really understand, that they get it, that it touches them where they are, and it actually addresses some of their needs.
So one of the things that you are a creative. You are a creative with all of these. The person who wrote your foreword calls it griot, Griot.
Yes, that's good.
Griot, one whose stories contain nuggets from which we can glean wisdom. You are a griot. You are a gatherer of wisdom, and a creator. And even, you and I have talked about it before, you're somebody who gets downloads. And I'm the first one to say, downloads, everybody talks about downloads, and people think when you get a download, it means you've got the whole book word for word, and
Yeah.
just start typing. But folks who have that download, who are super creative, who are gatherers of wisdom, to be brought into a container
Yes.
isn't easy. It's not easy. So if you would, how did you manage the corralling into a formula, corralling into stages, somebody pushing you to go, no, let's keep it here, let's keep it moving forward. How did you work with that? Because you're creative.
Well, I think, and you're talking about as far as the book itself.
Yes, as far as putting the book together.
Sure. Any journey you take, if you're going on a vacation, and especially if it's somewhere you've never been before, you submit to an itinerary. A lot of times, most of the times, you look for the agent or someone, or you look it up and you decide, I would like to do this, that, and the other, because this is what attracts me. And I think that for all of our journeys and adventures, there's just so much that we could say about it, that we could write about it. And I think that when in working with you, Anne, I found that I had the steps. It's almost like I got the steps before I went there. But I feel like Kilimanjaro called me back. She really did. It's like, all right, now we have some unfinished business here. And it wasn't just the mountain itself. It was personal. It was needing to know that I knew how to tackle some of my biggest challenges in any parts of my life. And I think when we're writing a book, we need a guide as well, because otherwise we can be all over the place. We're not communicating. So for me as a creative, yes, it was easy. I welcomed the corralling because I believe that it's essential to get you to the top of wherever you're going. We had a map that the guides showed us a map. This is what we're going to do on the first day. Don't worry about the days to come. Let's just look at each day. Here are some of the challenges you might meet. Here's how you can handle those.
So tell me about your download. When you say, and you use the expression download, how would you describe the download that you get, what it's like, what it means for a book?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think when one is trying to sleep at night, sometimes you need to make sure you don't go to bed with a question in your mind, unless you really want to be woken up for the answer. And that's what happens. Sometimes if I'm working on something, a poem, it was amazing. And I learned to keep a notebook by my bedside. And so here it is. I've had been working on a poem, for instance, and then I would wake up 2 o'clock in the morning and all of a sudden the words would come. Sometimes you think that, oh, this is so profound, I'll never forget it. I'll wake up in the morning, it'll be there. It was gone. And so what I would do is keep a notebook. And if I would wake up with something, and of course, anytime whatever it is, it's a powerful tool to use. If I have an assignment, like as we met, there were always assignments. Here's the next step, go work on this. And when you do that, and then you get your answers and you don't know when they're going to come, but I guess it's a time when you're most relaxed, so it's a time when you can actually listen to whatever is out there, whatever you think is out there. But it's an opportunity when you're quiet and still, you can receive all kinds of things, which I have received.
Some people call that a download from the universe. I call it your subconscious being your little helpmate.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, whatever you want to call it, it's real, it's there, and available to help.
Yeah, and I think as long as you're staying in the project and thinking about it and it's ticking away on the background,
Yes.
like there's so much help that comes. If you're in and out of a project, if you have to disappear for a couple of months, that, the downloads stop coming and you have to kind of prime the pump again.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I think really appealed to me about your story is your big why for starting Kilimanjaro that first time. It was very appealing to me, your story about your family and your parents in particular, and why that was motivation for you for taking that journey and really for becoming the woman that you became. Can you tell us just a little bit about that experience and what you were after and why?
Yes. Well, when my dad was 13 years old, he was born and bred in Miami, Florida. He had this desire, let me just call it a very deep desire, to live and work on the African continent. And that's a pretty, for a 13-year-old with no wherewithal, no money or anything like that. I don't know where it came from. And if he were alive today, I think I'd make sure that was a number one question I would ask him. But he changed our lives by his decision. And in many ways, I think what I do today is a combination of what my parents did. My dad did as being a pioneer, leaving the country with 4 kids in tow in 1962 at a time of a lot of volatility in this country. And And he was 33 years old. He started having kids young, but he was so determined. He had my brother when he was 17. My mother was 19, and it's very easy to think, oh my gosh, my life is over, that kind of thing. I'll never get anywhere. Well, he finished university and did some, postgraduate work as well. But the point is that he kept his dream in his heart, really. And because I think that was the driving force. And so the experience that we had of living on the African continent for 18 years, I did come back to the States after the 9th year because I came to university, and then I would go back and forth for holidays. But he laid the foundation, and it was something that I never forgot.
Yeah, I think your parents' story was, was a continual undercurrent. And I think those undercurrents add such richness to a book, like you were taking people through, how to be successful, how to forgive when you fail, how to go back and try again, essentially how to do hard things, how to be
Yes.
resilient in the face of the obstacles, because anything worth doing is going to be rife with obstacles. And of course, there's so many books out there on grit and resilience and doing hard things. And this is, of that brand. But what makes this book yours is that story of your parents, is that, who is this author? Where does she come from? Why does she do what she does? Why is she a good leader? And why is she the person to speak to this topic? And they were just such wonderful faces and such, such inspiration throughout this that, anyone would think and read this. It's like, wow, first of all, Mozella was so lucky to have this opportunity and this amazing family. And look how she paid it forward. Look who she became.
Thank you.
And look who we can become as well by gleaning this wisdom. So I loved the story.
Yeah, thanks. With change like that, especially when it wasn't something that I decided. I didn't get up one day and decide I'm taking my family somewhere across the world, but it can turn your life upside down. I left a African-American public school in Miami, Florida at 9 years old, and was transported into a white, excuse that movement, a white, just post-colonial British school in Uganda. And it is it's a real shakeup. And I think that that even that journey over those 9 years, going to boarding school in Kenya and all of that, everything counts. And it just makes you value the challenges, and if any way you can reach you paying it forward, I think it's really important. It really fills and fulfills our lives when we have something that we are aware of that we can share with others that could make a difference in their lives.
What are you going to write about next?
I discovered in 2019 that my book, Rise, was a trilogy, and that was downloaded. I won't go into those details, but the next thing, what I'm working on right now, is a book called Discover. And I guess when I was about, maybe about 64 or 65, I walked across England with one of my sons and a friend, and it was 192 miles and 13 hard days. And there were lessons. Nature is just my favorite master teacher. And so I'm writing about the lessons that I discovered during those very, very hard and glorious 13 days. And then the next one will be Emerge, which is the third part of the trilogy, which is climbing Machu Picchu in Peru.
So
Yeah.
So part of your business, if you could describe your business, what it is that you help people do, how you help people do it, we'll probably understand why these books, not just because, you know, you're a writer and because you're an adventurer, but why these books?
They are not only useful for personal development, but also leadership. You know, it's a guide for one's leadership skills as well. And they really are one and the same. We don't realize the extent to which we bring well, I think more people are realizing it now. You find everybody's talking about it, whereas before it was like, don't bring your personal anything, you know, you don't bring your whole self to work. You just bring your work self to work. And I think women in particular have suffered as a result of that, the burnout, the overwhelm. It's like we're supposed to ignore these very, very critical parts of ourselves. And so I look at the books as being a way to understand, first of all, most of us are, when it comes to our goals, we find ourselves here and we want to go there. It may be up here, it may be over here, but there are steps that we need, the lessons we need to learn. There's steps that we need to take. We need to first be prepared and ready within ourselves. You know, that really is where the power does lie. It's not something that somebody necessarily puts in you. It's in you, and you need to recognize it and learn to use what's already there so that we can fulfill our dreams and desires and being who we already are. The seeds already planted. You know, I love the acorn, knowing that, well, what does it take to get an acorn to grow into an oak tree? Well, everything that acorn, everything that is required is already in it.
And I do think that adventure, I think adventure really does awaken you to your power.
It does.
Because that's how I found a lot of my own power in, under seeing the capacity that I had. And it's always when you meet an obstacle and there's just no way around it. You can't even imagine getting around it. And here you go, getting around it.
Yes.
That you discover that. So I do think that leadership and going through the process and awakening to what you're capable of through obstacles, through pushback, through exhaustion, through all the stuff that comes at you as a leader, and staying steady and not freaking out and not throwing your hands up and quitting, although, not that you don't think about it all the time. It is an amazing metaphor for leadership. Are you doing retreats these days?
Yes, I do retreats on a seasonal basis, and they are a small group of, an intimate group of women who have an opportunity, and they come from all walks of life, and they have an opportunity to address one particular area. Sometimes it's about their being. Sometimes it's about their vision and their purpose. Other times it's about, well, I need to change. I need to rise to this occasion. And it calls upon me to be more who I already am. And that takes a lot of courage. So I love the retreats. I don't want to call them obstacles, but we tackle things that need to be, a friend of mine says, opening the kimono. We really need to just open up and look inside ourselves. And then when someone else is sharing, it gives me, oh, that's a brave thing and very adventurous. I'm willing to now tell you, yes, what it is I want to work on. And I really want your support and help in doing so. So the retreats do a lot of good work, and it's because of the women they're doing it for and with themselves.
Yeah, and I think you're a perfect guide for that, because you have to create the trust. You have to create the environment. You have to create that safe container that people can be themselves. And it does require an excellent guide to do that. So Mozella, I cannot thank you enough for taking time out to talk about this process and about your book and about all of the great things that you've got coming. So
Well,
thank
thanks so much for having me, Anne, and I'm looking forward to our next chapter.